Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Public Works Committee will come to order. We have a full agenda today, and as usual, we'll start with the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that staff or members of the council need to pull for discussion?
C3.
C3? Anything else?
I make a motion to approve the balance.
All right, it's moved and seconded to approve the balance of the consent agenda. Any discussion? If not, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. That's approved. And we will go, please, to C3.
Item C3, resolution approving a change in the calculation of impervious surface area for the Smith Reynolds Airport.
And Mr. Turner?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, what this item would do is treat the runway section and taxiway section of the airport similar to the way that we treat roadways for purposes of calculating impervious surface and under the city's stormwater ordinance. And those roadways are not considered impervious for purposes of calculation of our stormwater fee, and this would treat the runways and taxiways the same way.
And as I understand it, this is an adjustment recommended by our attorney's office.
Requested by the airport authority and it's accepted by the attorney's office.
Okay. Yeah, the original request did come from the airport authority. Mr. Clark?
Private roads, do they get counted?
No.
So are there any other, if we were to adopt this, are there any other instances where it might come into play? Just this change of definition.
The other example that I thought of when this came through would be some facilities we have at our transit maintenance facility might qualify, but it would be a very small percentage of impervious surface that would change there.
But we own that.
Correct.
So, I mean, do we pay taxes on our own stuff?
Yes.
Into the
Correct.
fund?
For what we have off the street, correct, we do.
Okay. So I'm just trying to think what's impervious that is currently not taxed, and you're telling me private roads would not be taxed.
Correct.
All right.
Okay. Further discussion or question? Yes, Ms.
Yes,
Adams.
thank you. I guess I was going to ask Mr. Turner, is this the new norm? Are we the only ones, or are there other cities that have done likewise already?
I'm not aware of what other cities have done on this. We'd be happy to check on it.
Please
for you.
do. Please do. Because what we're talking about is $64,000 that we won't see.
53, I think. 53.
Oh, yeah, 53. But that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Is there further discussion, or is there a motion on this?
I would like to hold a committee till we hear what other cities are doing. There's a lot of airports in the state.
I'd be happy to do that. I would have probably had to abstain until I get that information by Monday, but if we won't have it by Monday, we should hold it.
All right. So we
They
can
get
help.
billed once a year, right?
Correct. Well, no, I think they get billed. Keith, do they get?
Billed on the rotation cycle, but it totals to that amount.
So I think they get billed either monthly or bi-monthly, and then this is the annual cost that they incur.
I would prefer that we hold it till we get some answers back.
All right. Without objection, we'll hold it for the November committee meeting. Okay, then we'll go to the general agenda. Item G1, please.
Item G1, update on mobile pay pilot program.
And this is Mr. Turner's report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we, as you know, have a number of pay stations around the central core of downtown. These replace parking meters, and you go to one centralized location in the block and pay for the parking for the space. The way the system currently works, you pull a ticket, you pull a receipt, you put that receipt in your window, and that indicates how much time you have available to park. We've been approached by a company called Passport Parking to implement as a pilot a supplemental feature where you would be able to pay for your parking space usage using either an app on your phone, or going to their website, or calling a number, and the last option they have is sending a text message that would then, once you have an account with them, it would charge your account for the usage of that space. One of the interesting features about it is that you'd be able to use your phone, as I mentioned earlier, and that means that you could actually pay for the space while you're still sitting in your car, or you could go into the building that you're visiting and pay for your parking as soon as you get in the building. And if you had a meeting that was running long and your parking was going to run out, and the app, if you use the phone app, does keep track of how much time you have left. If you found that you were running out of time, you could add more time to your allocation by paying more. So we recommend that council consider this proposal. We would obviously bring it back for your full consideration at the appropriate time if you're amenable to this concept.
Mr. Montgomery.
Based on the current systems we have in place, who operates those systems, the current pay stations?
The city operates them, and we have a contract with a service provider to do the billing.
And so I think the concept and I think the use of technology is great and to look at it and see how it works for us in this community. But my question goes to in terms of as we would have in essence another party whose application will be used in this way, are we not in a place to have our own system in which we're utilizing in this way? I'm thinking of the convenience charge that they have, even though it's only 35 cents. When we think about how much it actually costs to park, in a place and what you're paying for, how much of a convenience charge compared to what it costs you to actually park there. And if it's going to be something that we would encourage people to use in terms of encouraging the mobile payment system as a solution for people, is that balance? Is that a real balance in terms of that fee? And if we had it ourselves and had if we had our own operations that utilized that method, would we be able to do it in a way that was more beneficial to the public? And I'm not sure if we have the capacity to do so or not, and if there are other options that may exist that, again, because it costs so little to park, is that at 35 cents, how much is that compared to me parking?
35 cents compares to the parking rate for a pay station, which runs from 25 cents up to $10, depending on how long you want to stay. So if you're staying a long time, then the $10 is not 35 cents is not a significant component to $10. Obviously, it's a massive component if you're talking about only staying for an hour. And so people would still have the choice of paying with the traditional method, and so would not have to incur the 35 cents under this concept. In terms of whether we would have the capacity, whether that's technological or staff or anything else, to be able to implement our own program, we'd have to do some research. I'm sure there are patents and copyrights associated with this particular methodology, and so whether we would be able to implement our own system or not, I'd have to get back to you on.
Yeah, because, from thinking of one in terms of an hourly parking, been plenty of meetings where that hour meeting turned into an hour and a half. And, once you've gotten in that meeting, you're not necessarily thinking about running back out to the meter to re-up on that. So I think if you had the ability to do that on your phone, that'd be great to avoid the ticket. But, I don't know. I'd be interested to see that information. I think it's a good concept and interested to see how we could implement something like that. Just wonder if we have capacity in-house to do it.
Certainly.
Mr. Taylor, then Ms. Adams.
Mr. Turner, right now, as parking enforcement rides by, they're able to look at the receipts from the parking meters to
Correct.
tell exactly when the person parked and when the time should expire, correct?
Correct.
If we move to the system that has been proposed by Passport Parking, how will parking enforcement know that the time has expired if someone went in and re-upped the time on the phone, on the cell phone? Is there some kind of electronic device they'll have at their disposal to mark parking space, or I'll be quiet and just let you give me some information on that?
Sure. Under the new system, for those who are implementing or using their new system, we would get a text alert to our enforcement people letting us know that this space has now expired. So if a person bought additional time, they would not get that alert until the additional time had expired. And then we would go by and see whether that car was still there.
All right, great answer. The transaction fee. It's not something, from what I've heard, that we don't get a portion of the transaction fee.
That is correct.
So maybe we should look at possibly taking it on ourselves, or maybe bidding it out to other companies. I'm sure there are other companies other than Passport Parking who may have this technology. And, I don't think we should be in this thing to make money. It should be a convenience factor for our citizens, but maybe we could receive a percentage off the transaction fee to put in other projects or to upgrade our technology as time goes on. I just wouldn't put all of our eggs in one basket and go with the first person. Hey, this is a wonderful concept. Technology advances. We've got to stay up with the times. So I do feel that this is necessary, but let's look at other companies, figure out what kind of deal we can make, and try to make somewhat of a profit off this thing and provide the convenience that our citizens deserve.
We'll take a look at it.
Ms. Adams.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Turner, I would like to know, like for the city of Asheville, again, what kinds of fees are they assessing, or the person that Passport, how much money are they making a year or a month or whatever? Give me a total, how much they're accruing. And I'd like to, I guess the location and the logistics GPS of this deal. Are you telling me we're going to grid out every parking space in Winston or something in order for this to work? Because, like you said, there's going to be like a central station, but you can do it from your car. So is it GPS connected as well to allow the system to know that I'm parked on Trade Street at X block or wherever, where it might even be a no parking zone or something, but...
No, this would only apply to the pay station locations, not
Okay.
citywide.
Okay.
And it would require the marking of each on-street
Space.
parking with a number, so that the
Like
person
in the
knows
Arts
what.
Council's parking lot or something?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So if, for instance, you wanted to text to extend your time, you would text to a certain site, address, phone number, whatever it is, and input as part of the text the space that you're in and the street you're in.
Okay. Again, I guess to Councilmember Taylor and Montgomery, I would like to see a metric of financials for what it costs us right now with parking attendants and tickets or whatever costs associated with parking versus what this will do for us. If we could determine how many hours, productivity, are we going to end up eliminating jobs, which that won't be good, but we need to know all of the particulars, as you said, to this right here. Okay?
Mr. Clark.
That's it.
First of all, I think it's worth looking at. I don't think it's going to be a big revenue generator. It's my understanding these space stations replaced meters.
That's correct.
So, and the reason we did that was we were having a lot of mechanical issues with it.
That was part of the reason, yes.
And then we got to send somebody by to empty the cash.
The money.
You could certainly Google who else may offer this type of stuff, but I would certainly entertain a proposal. It's only 90 days and kind of see how many folks use it. Pilot thing. I think it would net, I think the city would make the money because I do think there's people that probably the meter would run out and they would replenish it more often than our little truck drives by and writes tickets. So, but we could certainly give it a try. I don't see much downside. I think it'd be heavily expensive to go develop some software and just see. Now, I have been in parking decks where you went to the little place and bought a ticket and your slot had a number. Mm-hmm. And that might be worthwhile someplace like with the one on, we do have some parking decks that are not attended, a few.
City Hall South.
City Hall South.
Yeah,
for example.
South.
That might be worth, if we wanted to put in a short-term parking, hourly parking, an area like that, that would have one of these meters, or you could do it. I'm too old to do this, some of you youngsters might. But I'd say bring us back, this is just for information, I'd say bring us back something, let's give it a try.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yeah, and one additional piece up on this same note. In the past, I've kind of asked, and I just wonder with this piece coming up again, when we're looking at parking and parking enforcement pieces, as well as the decks we still operate today and lots we still operate today, in terms of a cost savings metric comparing to implementing new technologies for checkouts, for gate operators and things we currently have. Not to say that we would eliminate those positions that we have currently doing those jobs, but, if we were to implement those systems and in time are able to phase out those roles, what are cost savings that exist? I'm not saying you eliminate the jobs immediately, but if you're able to put those systems in, because if we look at some of the decks and things we have now, the reason I think they're probably more economical for some of the people that own them now because they don't have them fully staffed. But I think if we have some of those instances where we need to have people there during big events where things are going, where having a regular checkout might not work because you have 100 cars trying to get out, you need to have somebody present. But just for everyday operations, there may be some technologies like this that others use that I would like to see in terms of if that's something we could be able to utilize.
One thing, the comment I would make is that in theory we can do a lot of analysis and exploration. That's going to involve a pretty big chunk of staff time, and I'm wondering at what point we have diminishing returns really on staff investigatory time to try to price something out that at least in the pilot program is going to be extremely modest in its net impact. Would folks be willing to entertain a suggestion that we try the pilot, see if it functions well, and ask staff to do some basic investigation in the meantime, what other cities do, whether there are other competitors out there that do the same service. I tend to agree with Mr. Clark. I think that developing our own software from scratch is just going to be beyond what we've got the capability to do, and so if we want to do this, it's probably going to be a question of do we go with this vendor or the other vendors that we would want to look at.
I think that's it. The biggest of my concerns, Mr. Chairman, is just negotiating the transaction fee. If it cannot be negotiated, then I think we move forward because it is a necessity. But if it can be negotiated by working with this particular company, Passport Parking, or another of equivalent status, then I think we should do it. I'm not asking that we go into all the other stuff at this time, but that seems pretty simple to me.
Okay. All right. And do you want to hold it in committee until we get a preliminary report on whether they're the only folks that do it? Or do you want to authorize a pilot agreement and then study in the meantime? Preference?
I suggest let them go ahead and bring back an agreement next month, and that gives them 30 days to do a little check and see if anybody else provides.
Is that okay?
My comments on the additional pieces are absent of this conversation on the actual parking piece of that. I'm fine with where we are with this piece. I want those things aside from this. It's not, I wouldn't wanted those to be a part of the discussion on this, but just some additional pieces of it.
All right, now I understand. All right, so we've got consensus. Look at possible competitors, look at the transaction fee, and bring back a proposal for us as an action item next month.
That's fine,
Okay.
as long as they attempt to negotiate the transaction fee.
Okay, that's fine. And I'll just say, from my perspective, that I tend to avoid the spaces that have the new. You get out on the block and pay into the machine and bring it back and put it on your car. Primarily because on a good day, I'm sprinting into the room, 30 seconds before the meeting starts. And I'd cheerfully pay the extra 35 cents to be able to do it from my phone once I get in and sit down. Maybe I'm sure I'm not unique, and I bet there are enough people like me that would pick up some additional revenue.
That many more.
Okay. All right. We're asking for a review of alternative vendors, and we'll have a proposal before us next month. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Item 2.
Item G2, information on Bowman Gray Stadium property methane remediation strategy.
Thank you. Mr. Huff.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, as you may recall, staff was at the July committee meeting and provided an update on the status of emergency activities in response to elevated levels of methane at the Bowman Gray properties and how it affected those adjacent neighborhoods. Since that point in time, the sweeping, if you will, surface methane detection of all buildings, parking areas, fields, etc. on the property is complete. We found no surface methane with the exception of one crack which was remediated with bentonite and compost. So we're happy to say that all of the known methane issues on the property have been resolved, and we are monitoring that at this point. Also, methane testing of the houses on Williamson, Golson, Diggs, excuse me, and Fitch has occurred over the past several months. Some properties have been examined multiple times. Every structure and the surrounding property has been tested, and we found no methane within the structure. We have only found one instance where there was methane seeping out of the cracks in one of the driveways, and that was more toward the right-of-way area. And that's something we are evaluating at this point in time as well. Also, we have looked at the utility lines in the southwest lot. We have TV'd the storm drainage and the sanitary sewer. We found a sag in the sanitary sewer line that may be contributing additional moisture to the waste stream. And that's something that we've asked the consultant to look at in the evaluation of remedial options. As you probably recall, the committee asked staff to look at remediation options and what would be a viable solution to deal with the methane issues on the southwest lot and the east lot. The consultant has rendered that report. They've looked at all types of options, from removing the waste to extraction wells to interception trenches. It turns out that the interception trench option is the more viable option. It is a stone pocket with a pipe running through it, has a blower and the flare that we talked about in July. This is a system that can pull the gas back off of those residential properties and then destroy the gas via the flare. So this is what the consultant recommended for both, again, the east lot and the southwest lot. We have some preliminary cost estimates for you to review. We've got the estimated cost for the southwest lot coming in at $851,000. This is for design, permitting, a substantial sewer relocation that would have to occur at the southwest lot, and all of the procurement and construction administration as well, with an added 15% contingency. So $851 approximately for the southwest lot. We have a estimate of $221,000 roughly for the east lot, a lot smaller system there, but the same type of infiltration trench, blower, and flare assembly. In your package, you have an overview just denoting the locations. We are talking about what they describe as disposal area 1 and disposal area 2.
These are on page 5.
Page 5, I'm sorry. And just moving forward, we're drilling down into the next page. This is the southwest lot. Their approach is to situate the flare along Diggs Boulevard. Then the infiltration trench will ride the perimeter of the property, starting on the west, moving down to the south, and moving along Williamson, and then moving up. So pretty much all of the perimeter of the property except for the eastern portion. This is based on the gas concentrations. So again, the flare would be situated along Diggs Boulevard. Next exhibit is the east lot. Much shorter system along the south boundary of the property, and the flare would be situated at the back corner. So this is what the consultant has come up with conceptually, and it's important to note here that we're investigating options for cost reduction, also talking with the state as well as we move forward. So be happy to entertain any questions.
I do have a question. You mentioned flares. Why haven't we considered capture?
As far as discussions with the consultant, they do not know that this methane stream warrants or is long-term enough to warrant the capture and use. We haven't come to terms with the duration of the considerable methane generation yet. to warrant a capture and use situation.
I'd like to ask that we review that. If it's economically feasible to capture for use rather than flare off, we should consider it.
Okay.
Thank you. Other comments or questions, Mr. Clark?
Is any way for them to measure how much gas is coming on?
It's my understanding that they've got a formula to look at the curves and generate how much gas over a period of time. So, yeah, it's my understanding. I'm not familiar with how accurate that formula is, but they can do a calculation to try to measure that over time.
Okay, and then the flare, does it have a pilot on it?
Yeah, it would be a solar ignited flare. There's a solar energy source or solar panel with it to serve as an energy source to reignite the flare.
And does it work continuously, or does the fans run a couple hours and then shut off in a couple hours?
Yeah, it's my understanding that the system would cycle, and when there's not enough gas to warrant it, it would cycle through, and that comes back to all the methane generation curves, how consistently methane would be generated from these landfill units. And those are part of the calculations.
It's kind of piggyback on what Mr. Best is referring to. I'd be surprised if it's that significant amount of methane here, given how old this is.
Yes.
In this small area.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be infeasible in this location, but I think we should ask to determine that. I mean, we do capture and reuse at our Haynes Mill.
But it's
But
1,000 times bigger than this.
well, it's bigger.
I mean, this gas has been under there for 70 years, and we only detected it in 1 or 2 places.
It's been bad.
Well, I'm thinking,
I'm
once
kidding,
you
I'm kidding.
empty it out, I'm not sure how much more is down there. But I like the plan. Is the sewer line, that's rough, that's half your cost on one of them. Is that us, or is that utilities, or is that could you not fix it?
It is in the waste stream.
That's utilities, and we'll be talking to them probably after the design concept is finalized. We'll be taking an item to them in January.
Okay, and could that also be contributing to the methane, since methane is in a sewer pipe?
Yeah, the moisture from the pipe sag in the sewer line could be exacerbating the methane production.
So just fixing that would may make a difference. Okay.
Mr. Montgomery.
And kind of on those same lines in terms of the impact from the sewer line, is there any sense of telling how long that has been the way that it is?
As far as the deficiency in the sewer line,
Right.
no, sir, I do not.
Right. And so for source of funds from city in terms of the remediation portions that will come from us, what would that be?
Stormwater funds.
Stormwater funds
For
for all of it?
Well, utilities for the utility line work,
Right.
and stormwater for the rest.
Okay. And as well, we are in the process of scheduling another neighborhood meeting to inform the community around of these findings of what's being discussed at this time as well, just to make sure that the public is very well aware of what's happening.
Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, I just want to say very briefly, I'm glad you mentioned that. I represent the other community on the other side of MLK. We always say that you can't put a price on safety. I think this is a good remediation plan. I just wanted you to state for the record, the residents surrounding the area are in no danger of any harm as a result of methane. Is that correct? I want to hear you say it.
Yes, sir. We have worked with the consultant. Everything on the Bowman Gray property has been swept. Every homeowner that is adjacent to the high concentrations of methane that we have found that would allow us in the property, we have swept their homes. It has come back empty. To my knowledge, there are no health issues associated with the methane for the adjacent property.
Thank you, sir.
Other comments or questions? And we can expect this to come back to us at what point? Or is it coming back to us?
The design contract will come back, and the construction contract at the appropriate time to this body.
Okay, very good.
For
And-
the work funded by the stormwater fund.
Do you have an estimated time frame?
It's going to take several months for the design, so we do not.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, one of the challenges is we've got to do this in phases to not negatively impact both racing and football because it's both parking lots that have to be. So we're trying to thread a needle to get it done.
What would be the timeline, you think, to do?
For the utility work, we would be looking at starting after football season, and for the rest of the project, it's probably going to be a year away from that.
So we try to repair the sewer line or move it or whatever you're doing in the next 8 months, and then we would wait till after racing and football to do the.
It'll take that long
this time next year.
It'll take that long to get through the design work that has to be done, and so we'll be in the middle of the next activity season, so we'll have to wait until that activity is over in order to be able to effectively get into the area.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rupp. Item G3, please.
Item G3, information on annexation agreements.
Mr. Turner.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it's been a long time since City Council actually dealt with an annexation agreement. Under state statute, cities are allowed to enter into annexation agreements with one another to define the areas of the unincorporated portions of the county or the region they're in that they will not annex. So the city of Winston-Salem, for instance, would enter into an agreement with another city to indicate what Winston-Salem would not annex. That other city would also enter to the same agreement indicating what portion they would not annex. An annexation agreement is not an indication that a city is interested in annexing any particular area. One, the annexation agreements are done in order to have effective planning, logical extension of municipal boundaries, reduce uncertainty for homeowners and developers about what municipality will eventually be making the rules for their area, to allow for better long-term municipal planning for financial reasons, and in some cases they have some other benefits, like if there are de-annexations, to indicate what would happen. Again, an annexation agreement is not an indication that a city is interested in annexing any particular area. Two, the city has been approached by the city has existing agreements with a number of surrounding communities and has been approached by Clemens and Rural Hall to renew the existing agreements. At your places, we didn't remember to include it in your package, but at your places, there are annexation agreement maps for those two communities. They've asked to extend those agreements as is without any changes, and if the committee is amenable, we would prepare an item to come back to you for consideration of those annexation agreements. I'll say it one more time. An annexation agreement is not an indication that the city is planning to annex any particular area. 3.
Please quote that.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yes, we do have a reporter in the back.
I did not know that.
Mr. Chairman, these are, I think, a fair standard for some of the newer council members. It's been a while, but we have them with a number of cities. No changes from what I hear.
Correct.
I would suggest we direct staff to go ahead and do the paperwork.
Any objection?
Question.
Yes, Mr. Rupp.
With the agreements themselves, for those rare occasions where you have voluntary annexation and requesting, if those areas lie in on the other side in terms of a portion that's on the other side of these lines, and it is a request from residents for annexation, by doing so, is that a violation of our agreement?
We are bound by the agreement for all types of annexations, voluntary or otherwise.
And the reality is, these only really apply now to voluntary annexations.
The law is such that involuntary annexations are essentially a thing of the past.
Yes.
Or the future.
Not the present.
Not the present.
Okay. If there are no objections, then we'll ask staff to prepare the paperwork for renewal of the agreements unchanged, with the understanding, frankly, that what that does is guide those new developments in unincorporated areas who they can apply to if they wish to come in.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Item G4, please.
Item G4, update on Winston-Salem Transit Authority Comprehensive Operation Analysis.
All right, thank you. And the presentation will be by Mr. Barnes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll say a few introductory comments. As you recall, we presented information on the proposed route changes to make the system more efficient and provide better level of service for some situations. We got a lot of public comment. They indicated there were hardships associated with those changes. Staff from the Winston-Salem Transit Authority and City DOT have gone back, taking into consideration those comments plus feedback from council members. Thank you very much for passing along those comments back to City DOT, because the process did require that we capture all the comments, even those that you guys were receiving directly from citizens. So with those revisions, we have additional information to share with you about what changes have been made.
Thank you very much. Now, here we go. Mr. Barnes, please.
Okay. Chairman Vesey, committee members, I would like you to direct your attention to the PowerPoint that we've prepared for you. As you know, the Winston-Salem Transit Authority and the DOT were charged with developing a new routing configuration that would incorporate more direct and efficient trips, shorter travel times, and increased frequencies. In order to come up with a new configuration, our planners contracted with consultants to provide travel patterns based on in-depth passenger surveys. This, in addition to existing trip data and demographic and geographic analysis, provided the foundation from which new routes were developed. The new configuration incorporated crosstown routes and circulators with our traditional hub and spoke system. The new routes were presented to you last year. Subsequent to the presentation, individual city council members met with WISTA and DOT staff to offer input on the changes. WISTA and DOT staff then invited public comment via Facebook, Twitter, WISTA website, and over 30 face-to-face public meetings throughout the city. Favorable and unfavorable comments are listed here and are representative of overall comments. In addition, you can refer to the comment matrix provided in your handout that identifies comments peculiar to your specific ward. Subsequent analysis of the comments resulted in further routing modifications to the original proposal. The goal here was, to the greatest practical extent possible, address council and public concerns. Also, as you can see, we are recommending additional service in all categories except Sunday. In order to make the most of the allotted time, we will go directly to the routes that have been modified as a result of council and public input. Please note that the blue lines represent the route as originally proposed, and the red line represents proposed changes to the original route. If requested, we can then review the remaining routes that are unchanged from their original presentation. In the South Ward on Route 1, we will travel south on Broadway to Academy instead of traveling on First and then south on Peters Creek Parkway. This will accommodate the Granville Senior Citizens Apartment Complex off of Academy. In the South and Southwest wards on the Route 2 circulator, we've included Westbrook Plaza Drive and Westgate Center Drive, and they were added in response to a petition containing 700 signatures. In the South Ward on Route 5, this bus will go south on Broad Street instead of Main Street and make a right on Arcadia to accommodate the Green Street Baptist Church and the Plasma Center. In the North and Northeast wards, we added weekday nightly and Saturday day and night service to Route 7. This would allow access to both the Forsyth Tech Transportation Campus and shopping at Summit Square. In the North, Northeast, and West wards, Route 8 will terminate at the Industries for the Blind. After several test runs, we determined that there was insufficient time to travel on University to the Sturmer Park transfer point. This route will terminate at the Industries for the Blind. However, access to University and Sturmer Park can be facilitated by connecting with Route 9, which services the IFB. In the North Ward and Northwest wards, service to Brownsboro Road was added as a result of a meeting with the IFB. They indicated that a considerable number of their workers lived on Brownsboro Road. In the Northwest Ward, Route 10 was modified to go by Crystal Towers on 6th Street as a result of a petition containing 144 signatures. In the north and northeast wards, Route 13 circulator was modified to service Andrews Heights Apartments. The circulator will connect with several routes at 5th and Highland. In the east and northeast wards, Route 16 was modified to service Castle Heights, Butterfield, Oak Ridge, and Lansing. In the east and northeast wards, Route 18 was also modified to service Butterfield, Oak Ridge, and Lansing. In the southeast ward, we created a new route. This is Route 27, and it is a circulator. It addresses the elimination of service from Green Oaks on the current Route 30 and other areas currently serviced by Route 29. The circulator will provide connections to 3 routes, Routes 21, 23, and 24, which service downtown and Walmart on Peters Creek. Next slide. Here you have the cost of our current service, the cost of the original modifications, and the cost associated with revisions as a result of council and public comments. The cost of our current service is $5,286,374. The cost of the original modification is $5,165,172. And the cost of the revisions to the original modification is $5,471,882. This is an increase of $185,508 over our current service. We entertain any questions?
Questions? Mr. Clark.
What we've handed here, does this have all the routes for my ward on it?
Yes.
Okay. So if somebody has a question, I can just let them know that.
Yes.
Second question. We currently, as you said, have a hub and spoke, so everyone knows that you will eventually end up downtown and change buses. Now you will have intersecting routes throughout the community where people can change buses.
That's correct.
At those places, will we have a bus stop or a shelter or anything like that? And then second question, I noticed in my ward specifically there's a route on Silas Creek Parkway, and I'm wondering how it's going to stop on Silas Creek, because that's not typically where you would see bus stops. If you could address those two questions.
Okay. Well, we are in the process of identifying stops, and we'll ensure that we stop in a safe place. All the routes, if I'm understanding your first question, all the routes that we have will be able to connect to downtown. Was that your first question?
No. Well, some of them don't. Some routes, if you got on the bus and stayed on it all day, you would never end up downtown. There's certainly. So those people might want to get off that bus and get on another route that it crosses.
Mm-hmm. But even the circulators, you can connect to routes that go downtown. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Where they connect, is it going to be a bus stop with some type of shelter or anything, or are they simply going to get off and stand by the sign for the area bus?
No, we plan to put shelters there. We have funds available to install shelters.
All right. Thank you.
Ms. Adams. Ms. Adams.
You can get Councilman Turner.
All right. Mr. Taylor.
Just a quick question, Mr. Barnes. You addressed the route going to Green Oaks, and I thank you for putting that circulator in. The one on Pleasant Street that reaches Reynolds Park Road all the way to the top, to the north, and to the south, it reaches Walltown Street. There were some neighbors who had some concerns about that route. I'm reading here that at the bottom, closer to Walltown, we're keeping the current stop. And towards the north, around East Sedgefield and West Sedgefield, it says extensive distance to stop. 24. Could you possibly, explain to me what that might mean? Because I'm sure I'm going to get this question as soon as I get home or sometime tomorrow morning.
Call my operations.
Okay, great.
Well, the new current system, under the new current system, that's going to be Route 24. And Route 24, once it reaches Martin Luther King, it makes a left on Argonne and Peachtree. And so the people on Pleasant would have to walk up or walk down. We have Route 21 that comes straight down Walltown. So right now there's no service in that area that you spoke of.
Okay, well, and we can still possibly adjust some things if there's some additional feedback from communities?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
That was Adams.
Thank you. Mr. Barnes, I apologize. In the North Ward, is there a circulator?
In the North Ward?
Yeah.
No, it's about 17.
Yes, current. It's going to be around 17.
Okay, that would be the 44.
Yeah.
44, yes. The answer is yes.
And do you and staff feel pretty good about the process of having to, we put something out there and then we began to give people an opportunity to give us feedback and input. And at this point, with what we got, and I know, like Councilmember Taylor said, we will probably end up, your staff, adjusting, making some minor tweaks. But you feel pretty comfortable with what we have right now, this product.
Oh, yeah. There's been a lot of work put into this, quite a bit of work.
But we knew that going in, didn't we?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it was done by the numbers from the beginning. And of course, we weren't under the illusion that it was going to stay like that. Of course, we had to have public input and your input. And so we have modified it, and we feel comfortable with what we've done.
Thank you.
Mr. Montgomery.
First, I'd like to say to you all and the rest of the staff, thank you. You all were given an onerous task to take a system and make it better. And anytime you try to make anything better, there are pains in that process. And so thank you for your work first. And so sure you all, just as we've gotten, those kind of calls, I'm sure you all have gotten that as well. But I like the process in the sense of the response, because it's very clear that you all have taken into consideration what the writers and others have had to say in terms of how it's being impacted and what we see today. And I think that's what happens in good process.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I will note that the original charge to staff was to look to how the system could be made to be more efficient and function better within the existing cost of operations annually. The staff did that. They came back with a plan. There were our public let us know that there were some problems with that. After the round of consultations and the round of hearings, I asked staff to see what they could do, making adjustments in response to the public concerns, and to let us know how much it would cost, but not to feel barred from proposing adjustments that would have a responsible level of increase. I think that staff has responded well to that charge. They've come back with a proposal that appears to be responsive to most of the concerns. And they've told us exactly how much it would cost. It's less than $200,000 a year for a system that takes over $5 million a year to operate. It seems to me to be a good, responsible proposal. And at some point, either this meeting or in the near future, we're in a position to decide whether we wish to recommend to the full council that it approve adoption of these changes. Ms. Adams.
Yes, again, just as my council members, we want to thank you and all of your staff for all the hard work and the abuse that you put up with from council and the citizens, because as you know, some of those meetings weren't pretty. But what it did was, again, it allowed the people, the users of the product, the customers, to help, frame how it should be, which everyone knows that's a win-win. That's priceless. I think, too, as we move forward with this, it's going to be real interesting to, again, as your staff and the city, how we communicate just as we did with the beginning and get everybody's input as to how we communicate this to everyone, of all the users, the different users of this product. Also, Councilmember Montgomery can attest today, we were at the Habitat dedication, and there was one of my constituents who was very much engaged in this process, that he was telling Councilmember Montgomery and I again how much he appreciated being allowed to be a part of the process. And again, I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
We did have one person, this is not advertised as a public hearing, we did have one person sign up with a request to speak. I think that we have time to do that. Mr. Tim Turn, if you'd care to, if you would be so kind as to limit your remarks to 3 minutes and give us for the record your name and address, and let us hear your comments, please.
My name is Tim Turner. I reside at 3860 Tangle Lane. Appreciate the time. This may be a little disjointed. I just found out about this several hours ago. After all the positive comments, I hate to be the skunk at the Sunday school picnic here, but I'm opposed to this. I ride Route 16, longtime rider, have been on that route for 15 years. I'm not going to speak specifically to the data that has been provided at the moment, but I will say I ride the bus typically 7:15 or 8:15 or 9:15 in the mornings, depending on my family schedule. In the evenings, I come back typically 5:15, maybe 6:15. This is purely anecdotal, I realize, just from my perspective, but our bus is typically full. And I think we have a great route. It's very diverse. We have folks who have professional jobs, blue-collar jobs. You have old folks on there. You have people that are going to Reynolds High School, who are going to other places of education. Something else I'd also bring up, if this route is gutted, you also lose a potential opportunity of, I know that there are going to be changes, going on with Route 40, and, you're going to have major traffic dislocations. That would be a great opportunity for people to use Route 16 as a major artery on Reynolds to come downtown. Next, I'd like to point to the data that was provided for you. Again, I just saw this today, and one of the items that has been provided for you was the comments section. And you will notice on there, there's something called current route on there, which I assume provides the current route of the individual's riding. You will notice under there that it shows 11 people commenting from Route 16, apparently. However, if you go further over to the last column, detailed comment/complaint, you will note there are 7 additional people who made comments concerning Route 16 who were misidentified as being on Route 1, including myself. So that's an indication of the sloppiness of the data, or at least of the presentation of the data. I would also point out, and that is on pages, excuse me, one moment, pages 5, 7, and 8. One moment. For example, I'm number 140, and I'm identified as riding current Route 1 and being in the Northeast Ward. I also suspect that some of those others that are labeled as Route 1 who have comments, specific comments, who do not identify as Route 16 probably are meant to be there, which also brings up another issue in terms of how that data is collected. In terms of, like, people, they filled out comment cards or went on the website to provide feedback. A significant number of our riders, for example, are Hispanic. And so they may not know, the route, not the route number, but it wasn't like the easiest process for a lot of these folks. And I personally handed out dozens of cards on our bus. There was a great interest in that route, which I don't feel is reflected here. Finally, in terms of communication, I think there's the illusion of communication. For example, there were the meetings that were held all across the city when this thing came out, but when the modifications were made, we weren't aware of those, so we never had a chance to make comments about that. In fact, the only reason why I even know about this meeting is because Brian Kubecki, who also rides my bus, happens to be on the advisory transportation thing. He found out about it this morning. We're both very interested in this. That's why I'm the only person here. I suspect there would have been a lot more input here. So this is what I would like to ask, is that there be some sort of accurate reflection of the ridership on Route 16. this is what I would suggest, is, have someone get on the bus for a couple of weeks and, actually get comments directly from these people. I mean, our route may fail. I mean, there may be other more important considerations, but it should at least have an accurate reflection of what's going on here. I mean, the data that I'm looking at here, for example, if my ninth grade boy was, doing a science project, the teacher would read the chart and say, this wasn't very well done. So, anyway, that's what I say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. And if staff could make a note of Mr. Turn's specific concerns and give us a feedback on that. Mr. Taylor had to Mr. Taylor had to go, and he did have some specifics he wanted to follow up with staff before we acted on this. He suggested, and I think it's a reasonable suggestion, that we hold this in committee for consideration at our November meeting. If the committee is so inclined, I would like to suggest that we think of that as an action item at that meeting, if that is possible. Of course, the committee can decide at that time that that we're not ready to vote, but I would like for us to be thinking in terms of the possibility of it being an action item in November. Mr. Clark, you had further question or comment?
Yeah, question. How do you do this? Do the new routes have blue signs and the old routes have green signs, and you put paper bags over the new ones until you're ready, and do you do it all at midnight on February the 10th?
Well,
How do you do this?
it's yeah.
Operation change.
Yeah, we have funds in place to provide shelters and signs, and it's a process. And frankly, once we get the go from you all, we'll start that process. We'll put together a timeline and just do it.
But it would be done all at once. It would not be phased. That was a question that we had prior.
I would recommend to phase it, but I don't think you can.
You're going to have a long
Yeah.
for information before.
Because I would think you need to put up all the new signs, and they need to look a different color or something than the old signs.
Well, that's the
Yeah,
plan.
stuff like that. But it will take a while to go put up all the new signs.
It'll take a while, yeah.
And just to clarify, it's my understanding that the hearing and comment and review process that we have held thus far satisfies the federal requirements for public comment.
That's correct.
So this is not the interim step. We are in a position, if we choose to approve changes for implementation.
That's correct.
Mr. Montgomery.
Two things. One, I think to Councilmember Clark's question, I think it may be helpful to maybe have, and I doubt it would be something that would be solid now, but maybe like a tentative implementation. If we were implementing, what would that implementation plan look like?
Good point.
Which I'm sure there's something you all probably have that it looks like that, but just I think that's probably the question more so Councilman Clark is asking in terms of the how. And the second is in terms of what we have here with this piece that has some updates to it. And I know that you can, in the process, you have to go back and look at it, and you can't go back too many times, or you can never get an actual product you're going to actually present on. But I do believe that it would be well suited for additional thought from the public to understand, okay, with consideration from the public, this is what we started with. We heard your concerns, and this is where we are now, and this is what we hear. And I don't know if that's that we do hear from a council standpoint before we adopt it, or if that's something that's back out to Winston to do. But I'd personally like to hear, some thoughts, which may be the same thing. May say, hey, you hit it right on the nail. You captured exactly what we're doing. Which, from what I see, I think a lot of those things have been captured. But it'd be an interesting thing for me.
And I guess really, I need to hear from the committee. We are in a position legally of taking action without a further public hearing process. I would say candidly, if we're going to go to additional public hearings, that's going to be an extensive process. Because if they're going to be meaningful and not just, addressing.
Every time you have one, you're going to get a lot of other comments and
Gonna
you'll
get
never get it
different
done.
people.
That's my inclination as well, is that we can set up an endless cycle of tweaking and comments. And if it's the committee's determination that we need to do that, then, understand that that's what's going to happen.
I'll say this, I would defer to other council members, because I don't deal with, my ward doesn't deal with this as much. And you start talking about all these routes, I'm not sure where even they are. But I certainly think you need to be comfortable with it, James needs to be comfortable with it, and other folks. And I look to you folks to do and I understand James wants to sit down one-on-one.
Yeah, James has some additional tweaks that he wants to discuss before action. I had extensive questions, and my questions have been addressed. Ms. Adams, you were having comments?
I'm good.
All right. Mr. Montgomery, what's your word at this point? Do you want to think about it between now and November and decide whether you want to suggest an additional round of public hearings? Or?
But my thought would be to include it, and maybe I just do that for those that are impacted in my area, and that may be something that we address from that plan. It may not necessarily be for all the others, and maybe we just do something just to make sure that I know that the folk who I represent who ride these routes say, hey, these hit our concerns. But as I said when I made that comment the first time, I know we can get bogged down and you'll never get anything. But at least for me, it's one thing to say, okay, this is what we start with, want to hear from you, and then we have something, but we don't go back and say, we heard you, and this is what we did.
Okay.
Now, if you didn't go back from there, hey, we can go ahead and move forward. But I'm saying, if I want to say that, yeah, I heard you, at least I show you before I approve what it is that I heard you from.
Okay. Let me suggest that that you hold an input session and specifically address whether you get the feedback on whether your constituents have been heard, and then be prepared in November to let us know whether you're comfortable with the vote at that point, or whether you want to ask us to, as a committee, to consider a second round of full public hearing process. Would that be reasonable? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, one thing I would say is that in general, without getting into the details, the new changes respond to in excess of 80% of the comments that we received.
Yeah, and it's my perception that the changes did address most of the substantive requests and suggestions, but I don't pretend to have compiled a comprehensive mental list of all the suggestions. So I was prepared to hear that I was wrong on that today. Thus far, I'm hearing most of the members say that with the possibility of a couple of exceptions, they think that staff has done a good job of responding. So prepared to hear to the contrary in November, but at this point my suggestion stands that we hold this till November, consider it as a potential action item in November, and Mr. Montgomery, if you would be so kind as to get additional feedback and let us know whether you would agree at that time. Okay. All right. And thank you. And I did include the request to staff to please look at Mr. Turn's specific comments and be prepared to report on that as well. I mean, those are reasonable concerns, and let's see what the changes that were made, how they respond to those.
Certainly.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Is there anything else for today's agenda? That concludes our advanced agenda items? No. All right. In that case, thank you, everyone, and we will stand adjourned.